whether Kincaid found traces of the Grand Canyon civilization. The article, based on quotes of explorer and Professor S.A. Jordan, provides very detailed descriptions of the cave and the chambers. Around 17 meters away from the entrance, there are oval-shaped doors on the sides of the main tunnel, leading to other tunnels and separate rooms, the total number of which is over 100. One of the largest chambers serves as a tomb, and it was exactly what Kincaid discovered during his first visit. The tomb walls aren't vertical, but are sort of slanting back at an angle of 35 degrees. On the walls, scientists found tiers of mummies, each of them occupying its own hewn shelf. Besides mummies, there are grave goods like copper cups and pieces of broken swords. At the same time, urns and funerary amulets on lower shelves are pretty crude, while the dead bodies stored on higher shelves were buried along with notably finer items. Researchers say each of the mummies is wrapped in bark fabric, and some of them are also covered in clay. This manner of burial somewhat resembles embalming, popular in ancient Egypt starting from 3400 BC or thereabouts. Interestingly, all the bodies in that chamber were male, and no children or women were found there. Besides, the minimum height of the mummies was 270 centimeters. It seems that this civilization's members were gigantic and much taller than modern humans. But even this fact didn't amaze researchers as much as lots of mysterious engravings they saw on plates, ritual utensils, and even the cave walls. Nobody has managed to translate them so far because the writing system of this unknown culture brings to mind both petroglyphs found in southern Arizona and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Apart from the tomb, archaeologists came across a few other strange rooms. One of them looks very much like a temple. This is a 60-meter-long chamber with an idol placed in its center that resembles Buddha. The statue is sitting cross-legged with a lotus flower in each hand. In addition to that, there were tiny stones scattered on the cave floor, carved with images looking like Buddha heads. Apart from that sacred space, archaeologists found multiple living rooms that were rather ascetic and comparable to military barracks. The cave turned out to have even a dining hall with various kitchenware stored inside. By the look of things, the cave interior could fit around 50,000 people on a regular basis. For comparison, Derinkuyu, the largest of currently known underground cities, which was built around 1,500 years ago, could accommodate only 20,000 residents. When exploring the cave, besides living rooms, scientists also found granaries. These sections were rounded, and as the experts pointed out, the material from which they were constructed was probably a very hard cement, although the eeriest findings were waiting ahead. One of the chambers immediately attracted everyone's attention because it had no ventilation system. When archaeologists peeked inside, they could see only darkness because their flashlights were too dim to illuminate the room. But that wasn't why they almost jumped out of their skin. They got struck by a weird smell, later described as a deadly and snaky stench. The chamber remained mostly unresearched because archaeologists didn't dare to step farther inside. They feared the room could contain a deadly gas or chemicals used by the ancients. All of these detailed descriptions were mentioned in the report by adventurer G.E. Kincaid and Professor S.A. Jordan. It was published in 1909 in a local newspaper in Phoenix, Arizona. The main catch is that, apart from those two men, nobody has ever seen the Grand Canyon underground city, and the only photos of it taken by Kincaid during his very first visit have been lost. Neither local museums nor the Smithsonian Institution, presumably involved in the expeditions, have artifacts from the cave to exhibit. What's even more perplexing is that its precise location still hasn't been established. But maybe that's because no actual attempts to do so have been made. Explorer Kincaid said he'd found the entrance to the cave purely by chance. He was making a boat trip down the Colorado River in search of rare minerals, around 68 kilometers upstream from the El Tovar Crystal Canyon. He saw stains in the sediment formation on one of the rocks. When Kincaid came closer and went up the Grand Canyon wall, he noticed something like a stairway and a rock ledge, or rather a shelf, in front of the entrance to the cave. It was absolutely invisible to anyone on the ground. But it's already been over 100 years since that day. So why has there been no expedition to find and explore traces of a mysterious civilization? The problem is that it's not so easy to find this passageway to the underground city. The Grand Canyon stretches 466 kilometers across Arizona, and around 1,000 caves are hidden within it. Researchers only know the exact location of around 335 of them. As for tourists, their options are limited to only one. Besides, entrances to some of the caves are blocked by large steel bars. For example, Stanton's Cave. It was discovered by engineer Robert Stanton in 1899. He and his team were trying to hide from the rain while in the Grand Canyon. When they climbed to a height of 40 meters above the river, they stumbled upon a cave. Inside it, the team noticed many fragments of clay molds that looked very old. However, excavations in Stanton's Cave were initiated only 70 years later. Archaeologists managed to find a lot of various artifacts. The collection includes 74 animal figurines made between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. Kincaid and Jordan mentioned the same period when estimating the age of their findings produced by an unknown prehistoric culture. However, right after the excavations were completed, Stanton's Cave was suddenly closed to public entry. The official reason is protecting a bat habitat. The thing is that the Grand Canyon caves are home to very rare Townsend's big-eared bats. Any human intervention in their fragile ecosystem could be dangerous to the population. That's why the entrance to the cave is sealed with special metal bars that let the bats get in, but stop tourists from joining them. This could pass as a plausible explanation if not for one thing. The bars didn't appear there immediately. For a long time, the entrance was blocked by an impenetrable fence so that absolutely nobody or nothing could get inside. By the way, tourists and archaeologists are not only prohibited from entering the caves of the Grand Canyon, it's not even allowed to look for them. You see, most of the caves are not detectable if you scan the canyon walls while standing on the ground. The chances of finding an entrance are much higher if you use a drone or explore the area in a helicopter. But actually, you'll achieve very little because there's the so-called forbidden zone of the Grand Canyon, where the use of drones and all general aircraft flights are restricted. And even outside the forbidden zone, helicopters can't fly lower than 90 meters above the surface. According to the official explanation, these restrictions are necessary to reduce noise pollution. In this way, Grand Canyon National Park managers take care of the populations of wild animals native to its territories. And yet, there's hardly a more effective way to find an entrance to a legendary cave than combing the area with the help of aerial surveillance. The whole controversy is fueled by the fact that the Smithsonian doesn't even try to do anything and just says there's nothing to find. It firmly believes the story about the ancient civilization is just fake news, even though one of the researchers who went to explore the underground city was a professor at their institution. I'm talking about S.A. Jordan, whose name appeared in the report published in 1909. In their official statement, the Smithsonian's Department of Anthropology denied that this man had ever worked or been affiliated with them. And that's true. But they did work with another Professor Jordan, only his initials were DS instead of SA, David Starr Jordan. He was a founding president of Stanford University and a famous ichthyologist. In 1898, he participated in an expedition to the Grand Canyon. Furthermore, David Starr Jordan collaborated with Professor Trevor Kincaid. We cannot definitely say if he was that very G.E. Kincaid who found the cave in its underground city, although it's likely that two prominent and respected scientists could accidentally or deliberately put the wrong initials when working on that article. Either way, the sensational publication in the Arizona newspaper isn't the only evidence that a mysterious society could really have existed in the Grand Canyon and left some traces behind. Skeptics believe the story of the hidden cave is a hoax made up by dishonest journalists, and that the detailed descriptions of the chambers are lies inspired by other Arizona catacombs beneath Casa Malpais. This ancient settlement was built by indigenous tribes in about 1260, although it was mainly its underground part that caught the attention of scientists. Archaeologist John Homan discovered it quite unexpectedly. He noticed a huge crack in the ground and saw cavities stretching deep down. Later excavation proved that the catacombs were a local burial site. This fact both surprised and confused archaeologists because back then, no underground cemetery like that had ever been found in the U.S. Besides, such a thing was considered uncharacteristic of the region's cultures. The catacombs were narrow rooms around 9 meters long and only 3.5 meters wide. Researchers found wall niches with stone cribs, each containing bones. Homan suspected the catacombs had been looted before scientists got there since they didn't find any burial artifacts like ceramics and tools. In total, Casa Malpais turned out to have nearly 100 graves. According to archaeologists, the local tunnel system occupies an area of around 10,000 square meters. As in the case of the Grand Canyon Cave, we have no photos of the catacombs under Casa Malpais. Researchers didn't take pictures of the ruins or even map them because this place is sacred to the indigenous people. It sounds like journalists who wrote about Kincaid's discovery could indeed have taken Casa Malpais' graves as a basis and fabricated the whole story. There's one detail, though. The news about the Grand Canyon civilization appeared in 1909, while the catacombs were discovered only in 1991. But who knows, perhaps these findings indeed have some connection. Maybe the Grand Canyon civilization passed on their knowledge to the indigenous tribes, especially since there are legends from the Hopi tribe to partly confirm this theory. One of them was recorded by researcher Rollins, and it tells of ancestors of the tribe who lived in an underworld in the Grand Canyon. The so-called People of One Heart fought with People of Two Hearts. Their chief, called Macheto, counseled the ancestors of the Hopi to leave the underworld. He planted a tree, watched it grow until it pierced the roof, and let the People of One Heart climb out. Since that time, the tribe began to live on the surface. So the advanced society from the Grand Canyon Cave may be really related to the indigenous tribes. But then, their possible connection to ancient Egypt may cast doubt on everything we know about human history. Those mummies, wrapped in bark fabric and covered with clay found in the cave tomb, have nothing in common with the burial practices the indigenous tribes were known for. What's more, the written language of that civilization is very different as well. There's a Xerox copy of a photograph depicting hieroglyphs allegedly taken by Kincaid. It shows symbols that really look similar to those found in the temples and pyramids of Egypt. If these civilizations are indeed related, it means that with the help of unknown technologies, ancient Egyptians managed to cross the ocean and settle in the territories of North America. Or perhaps it was the other way around. Maybe the Egyptians traced their origins to the mysterious underground city hidden somewhere in the Grand Canyon. Besides, some of the myths of the indigenous tribes dedicated to the cave's dwellers call them Anasazi. That doesn't translate as ancestors. This Navajo word means an old enemy. The stories told in those legends may send shivers down your spine. Traditional folklore of such tribes as the Navajo, Paiute, and Hopi mentions a bloodthirsty nation that once lived on their lands. Some experts think that traces of those people were found in Stanton's Cave in the Grand Canyon, which is now closed to the public. Exploring the settlement of this cruel society, researchers didn't find animal skins and bones to conclude that the tribe lived by hunting. Instead, they found human remains. When studying a niche used for food storage in one of the caves, archaeologists saw bones that presumably belonged to children. Curiously enough, the mysterious Grand Canyon cave had no animal remains or skins. Unlike the temple, the tomb, and the dining hall, most of the so-called living rooms in the underground city were almost empty. There were no clothes. There was no bedding. Nothing except water bowls. Could the ancient civilization that was able to develop culture and its own language be ferocious cannibals? Maybe that's why scientists deny the existence of the Grand Canyon Cave after all. And I haven't even run out of creepy legends associated with it. 1903, the Arizona Republic featured an article dedicated to an unusual meeting that had taken place in the Grand Canyon. A man named I.W. Stevens told reporters he saw a humanoid creature with long white hair and a knee-long beard. The man recalled that this thing didn't have any clothes on, but did have talon-like fingers. The Navajo and the Apache tribes also have a folk tale about an old man that roams the mountains, a human-like beast that goes hunting at night. Besides Stevens' experience, there are many other first-hand stories from locals who, according to them, saw similar creatures. Take the incident at a Boy Scout camp, for example. It happened in the 40s and was written down by cryptozoologist Don Davis. The campers claimed that they'd encountered a tall, hairy monster in the forest near the town of Payson. The scouts recalled that the creature was definitely more than 2 meters tall and had a strange, square-shaped head. Their weirdest memory was the monster's long-lasting foul stench. It smelled like decaying meat mixed with musk. The story found a more recent confirmation when Mitch Wade and Susan Farnsworth reportedly saw this thing on the outskirts of Young, Arizona in 2008. We could assume that all this evidence exists only because locals are obsessed with the legends of Bigfoot, if it wasn't for two things that link these tales to the Grand Canyon civilization. The first of them is the stink. In his article, Professor Jordan mentioned the weird dark room he hadn't dared to investigate. That was where the explorer smelled something he described as deadly and snaky, which seems quite similar to the stench of decaying meat and musk. Moreover, the creature all eyewitnesses encountered was much taller than regular people. Let me remind you that the mummies from the cave tombs were also unusually big. According to Kincaid, none of them were shorter than 2.5 meters. But at the end of the day, we'll never know for sure if there's a connection between folk tales of the local tribes, modern urban legends, and the mysterious civilization of the Grand Canyon, unless we find that physical entrance to the cave. At the moment, everything we know about that underworld is pure myths, indirect evidence, and an article full of dubious facts published in a local newspaper. But anyway, if I were you, I'd be very cautious when taking a trip to the Grand Canyon National Park, because if the rumors about the cannibal civilization prove true, you won't stand a chance of breaking the news. Do you personally believe that the secret cave is real? Share